Seamless steel tubes occupy one of the most demanding positions in all of heavy industry. They are used where a failure admits no margin: oil wells, high-pressure boilers, thermal power plants, refineries, chemical plants, steam lines, hydraulic systems, and the conduction of aggressive fluids. Their main advantage over welded pipe is not in appearance, but in the structural continuity of the material. Since there is no longitudinal seam, the tube wall maintains a more uniform stress distribution and eliminates the potentially most vulnerable point of a welded joint. But achieving that requires converting a solid steel cylinder into a hollow conduit without opening it from the outside. That challenge gave rise to one of the most elegant and complex metallurgical processes in existence. It all starts with a piece that is simple in appearance: a cylindrical billet, compact, heavy, chemically controlled, and destined to pass through a line where steel stops behaving like a rigid solid and begins to flow like a living mass under pressure and temperature. The manufacture of a seamless tube begins long before rolling. It begins in the melt shop when the exact chemical composition of the material is defined. Not all tubes work under the same conditions, which is why the steel is formulated according to the final destination of the product. Some must resist high internal pressure. Others work at high temperatures and need to maintain their mechanical properties for years. Others are exposed to corrosive environments, hydrogen sulfide, superheated steam, or alternating fatigue stresses. Carbon, manganese, silicon, chromium, molybdenum, nickel, vanadium, or niobium may appear in different proportions to give the material strength, toughness, hardenable hardness, or microstructural stability. With that composition already defined, the steel is cast into ingots, or more commonly obtained as a billet or solid section cylindrical billet. That piece does not enter the line like any ordinary scrap. It arrives with traceability, dimensional control, and an internal quality that must already be verified. Significant porosity, severe segregation, or an internal inclusion that is too large can ruin the entire process from the start. The seamless tube does not correct deep defects in the base steel. It drags them along. The billet is cut to the required length and passes to an initial inspection. Its diameter, straightness, surface finish, and the presence of cracks, folds, or handling marks are checked. If defects appear on the outer skin, they can be removed by grinding or localized machining, because a surface discontinuity at this stage, when passing through rolling, can lengthen and become a critical imperfection on the body of the future tube. Then comes the first major stage: heating. The billet enters a rotary kiln or a walking beam furnace, where the temperature rises progressively until it reaches, depending on the steel and the line, an approximate range of 1,200 to 1,300 degrees Celsius. This heating does not aim only to soften the material. It seeks thermal homogeneity. The core and the periphery of the cylinder must be as close as possible to a uniform temperature so that the subsequent deformation is stable. If the exterior is too hot and the interior is still too rigid, the piercing loses precision, the metal flow becomes irregular, and the tube wall thickness begins to deviate from the first minute. At that point, the steel no longer behaves like an inert block. Its resistance to flow decreases, its plasticity increases, and the internal structure becomes suitable for large deformation without immediate fracture. The red-hot billet leaves the furnace and advances toward the machine that defines the entire identity of the process, the rotary piercer, associated with the Mannesmann principle. That principle, discovered in the 19th century, changed the history of industrial tubing. Two truncated cone or barrel profile rollers placed at an angle relative to the axis of advance catch the hot billet and make it rotate while pushing it forward. They do not compress it in a simple way. They impose an intense rotation and a combination of stresses that generate particular tensions in its central zone. In the heart of the cylinder, a condition favorable to internal opening appears. The material, subjected to that field of stresses, tends to crack in the center before the surface. That tendency is immediately exploited with the help of a piercing plug or mandrel located on the axial line. The result seems counterintuitive. A solid block begins to open a vacuum from within. The plug does not cut like a conventional drill bit. It guides and consolidates a cavity that is born from the combined effect of heat, rotation, oblique compression, and localized internal traction. In seconds, the solid piece becomes a thick-walled hollow shell. There the tube is born, although it is still far from its final form. The precision of this stage is decisive. If the central cavity shifts, the wall thickness becomes eccentric. If the temperature drops too much, the steel offers more resistance and defects appear. If the plug is not in optimal condition, the interior of the hollow acquires marks, drags, or undue roughness. Everything must be aligned. Roller speed, feed angle, lubrication, temperature, tool condition, and billet geometry. The exit of the piercer already shows something essential. The seamless tube is not manufactured by joining edges. It is generated through integral deformation of the steel. The fiber of the material is redistributed around a continuous cavity. There is no longitudinal line where two ends meet. There is a single metallic body that has changed shape. When the hollow shell leaves this first phase, it still retains very thick walls, a large outer diameter, and a relatively short length. But the most difficult operation has already occurred. The solid steel has already yielded to the logic of the tube. The pierced shell is not yet a commercial product. It is barely a pre-form. Its dimensions are too coarse for any serious industrial service. Now begins the phase that converts that primary piece into a tube of controlled measurements, mandrel rolling, and the progressive reduction of diameter and wall thickness. One of the most widespread configurations is the mandrel mill, a line formed by several successive stands. Before entering them, a mandrel bar is inserted into the interior of the shell. That bar acts as an internal geometric reference. While the piece advances, the external rollers compress it and make it flow over the mandrel. The metal lengthens, decreases its thickness, and improves the regularity of the inner diameter. The tube grows significantly in length, sometimes multiplying the original length of the pierced hole several times. The physical logic is clear. The volume of the steel is almost completely conserved. If the thickness decreases and the diameter adjusts, the length must increase. This controlled elongation is one of the keys of the line. It is not only interesting to produce a longer tube, it is interesting to distribute the material uniformly around the entire circumference. Each rolling stand applies a partial reduction. None does all the work alone. The deformation is distributed in sequence to avoid instability, tearing, or excessive ovalization. At the exit of one stand, the tube already has a shape closer to the final one. At the exit of the entire line, the change is radical. The interior improves thanks to the action of the mandrel. The exterior improves thanks to the profile and pressure of the rollers. The steel, still hot, retains enough plasticity to continue deforming without collapsing. In other plants, configurations such as plug mill, hot pilger, or combinations with a stretch-reducing mill are used. The general philosophy remains the same: to bring a thick hollow shell to a long tube with thickness, diameter, and concentricity as controlled as possible. The difference lies in the architecture of the line, the dimensional range, and the type of tube intended to be produced. During this stage, process speed matters as much as force. The steel continuously loses temperature. If it drops below a certain threshold, its resistance to deformation increases, more aggressive tensions appear, and the dimensional finish becomes complicated. Therefore, many lines incorporate intermediate furnaces or reheating systems before the final reduction phase. It is not an energetic luxury, it is a metallurgical necessity. After the main rolling, the tube passes to a sizing or stretch reduction stage. Here, the outer diameter is adjusted with more precision. A sequence of cages with small contact rollers gradually reduces the tube. The relative speeds between stands are coordinated to impose a certain longitudinal traction. That traction helps to stabilize the piece, refine its measurement, and obtain an even greater final length. This section of the line requires very fine control. A small mismatch in speed between two cages can change the final thickness more than expected. A thermal difference between batches can alter the flow of the metal. A worn roller can mark the surface and compromise tolerances. Therefore, the production of high-quality seamless tubes combines robust machinery with precise instrumentation. The process seems brutal due to temperature and size, but in reality, it works with narrow margins. Then comes hot cutting or cutting while still tempered, depending on the line. A flying saw or a synchronized cutting system divides the continuous tube into manageable lengths. From there, a less spectacular but equally important phase appears: controlled cooling. The tube cannot simply be dropped and cooled in any way. The The cooling rate influences the microstructure of the steel. Depending on the grade manufactured, the piece may be air-cooled on a cooling bed, or it may be sent afterward to specific heat treatments. Normalizing, quenching and tempering, annealing or stress relief are common options depending on the application. A pipeline for high temperatures or for severe mechanical service does not only need good geometry, it needs an adequate metallurgical structure. Heat treatment corrects and stabilizes. It refines grain size, homogenizes properties, reduces residual stresses, and adjusts the balance between strength and ductility. In critical service tubes, this stage separates an acceptable product from a reliable one. A tube apparently correct in measurements can fail in use if its internal structure does not follow suit. After heat treatment, the piece passes through roller straighteners. Although the tube already has its shape, it may still present slight curvatures produced by rolling, cooling, or handling. The straightener applies calculated alternating bends to return linearity within strict tolerances. In long-length products, that straightness is essential for assembly, threading, field welding, coupling with other lines, or passage through automatic inspection equipment. At this point, the tube already looks very much like the finished product. It has length, diameter, and wall close to what is required. But it still remains to pass the part that defines whether it will be sold or rejected, the total verification of its integrity. The prestige of the seamless tube is born not only from how it is manufactured, but from how it is verified. The industries that pay more for this product do not buy a promise. They buy evidence that every section withstands extreme conditions without a longitudinal weak point. Therefore, once formed and heat-treated, the tube enters a control zone where dimensions, surface, internal defects, and behavior under pressure are reviewed. The first family of controls is dimensional. Automatic equipment measures outer diameter, wall thickness, ovality, eccentricity, and length. In high-specification products, thickness is not evaluated only at one point, but at multiple positions around the circumference and along the tube. The reason is evident. A tube that looks correct from the outside can hide an uneven wall. In pressure service, that inequality concentrates stresses and reduces the safety margin. Then comes the surface inspection. Cameras, sensors, or assisted visual review detect folds, adhered scale, roller marks, longitudinal cracks, deep scratches, or open laminations. Some minor defects can be removed by localized grinding, provided they do not compromise minimum dimensions. Others imply direct rejection. Seamless tube is sold precisely for applications where the material must inspire confidence, not doubts. Internal and volumetric inspection uses non-destructive testing. Ultrasound occupies a central place. Transducers send waves that pass through the steel wall and return with information about discontinuities, changes in thickness, or internal defects. If a wave encounters a crack, an inclusion, or an internal separation, the response changes and the system marks the position. In modern lines, this inspection is performed with the tube in motion and with full circumferential coverage. Eddy currents are also used, which are especially useful for detecting surface or near-surface discontinuities. An electromagnetic field interacts with the tube, and any local alteration modifies the signal picked up by the system. Combined with ultrasound, this method expands the sensitivity of the control. What one technique sees better in volume, the other can see better on the skin of the material. To these tests are added mechanical tests on samples from the batch. Tensile, hardness, expansion, flattening, bending, or impact according to the applicable standard. A tube destined for hydrocarbon transport is not evaluated the same as one for a boiler or one for mechanical structural use. A STM, a PIEN, or equivalent standards establish different requirements for each product family. The manufacturer must demonstrate that the steel and the process comply with that standard, not a generic notion of quality. An emblematic test is the hydrostatic test. The tube is sealed at both ends, filled with water, and pressurized above the intended service pressure within normative parameters. If a weak point, a leak, or an abnormal deformation exists, the piece fails. Water is used because, unlike a gas, it stores much less compressible energy and makes the test safer. The important thing is not only to see if it bursts, but to verify that it withstands the pressure without leaks or irregular behavior. Once the controls are passed, the tube proceeds to the final finish. The ends are trimmed to eliminate non-conforming areas from the rolling. Depending on the order, they may be left plain, beveled for future assembly welding, or threaded for specific joints. In some cases, temporary anti-corrosion coatings, varnishes, protective oils, or markings with paint and stamping are applied. Each tube remains identified with its grade, dimensions, standard, batch, and origin of manufacture. That traceability allows for following the complete history of the product from the melt shop to the final customer. Only then is it understood why the seamless tube costs much more than a welded one. It is not just a matter of material, it is a matter of accumulated complexity. It starts from a solid piece of controlled quality steel, requires uniform heating, extremely precise axial piercing, several rolling stages, possible reheatings, heat treatments, straightening, multiple tests, and a very high dimensional discipline.